So this was IMF. Now, what is the, okay, I'll go on to World Bank first, then I'll explain you how they are different. Both of them are different. Okay. Now, what is World Bank? Okay. World Bank was the other Bretton Woods institution, the other institution that was created in Bretton Woods, okay, that is in New Hampshire, United States in 1944. Now, this institute is also based in Washington, okay, and if you want to be a part of World Bank, you have to first be a part of IMF. That is mandatory. If you become a part of IMF, only then can you apply to be a part of World Bank. Okay. So, basically there are 5 agencies of World Bank. Okay. First is International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. That is Bank of Reconstruction and Development, IBRD. Then there is International Development Association, IDA. Then there is International Finance Corporation, IFC. Then there is Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, MIGA. Okay. And finally there is Dispute Settlement Body, that is International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, that is ICSID. Okay. I just told you these institutions, I'll tell you what they do now. Okay. These first 2 institutions form part of World Bank. Okay. Whereas all these institutions put together form the World Bank group. So, okay, International Bank of Redevelopment and Reconstruction and Development and International Development Association are World Bank, whereas all of these put together form the World Bank group. Okay. So now coming to International Bank of Reconstruction and Development. What is International Bank of Reconstruction and Development? Basically, this bank provided finance for the reconstruction of the economies, reconstruction of the infrastructure or industrial complexes of the nations devastated in World War II. Okay. Under the Marshall Plan, this institution provided money to these economies. But post the end of Marshall Plan, that is post the end of the reconstruction process that was there in Western Europe, now this organization provides soft loans to poor and developing nations. Okay, what does it provide its loans for? It will provide loans for human development, agriculture and rural development, environmental protection, infrastructural development, and maybe governance. For such things, it provides soft loans. Now, what are soft loans? Soft loans are those loans that are provided for a period of 25 to 30 years at a very small interest rate. Very small interest rate can be around 2%, 3%. Okay. So this is the organization that does that now. It basically believes in bringing about human development or environmental development or infrastructural development in the poor or the developing countries. Like poor countries can be African countries, developing countries can be India, China. Africa is the biggest, borrower, or you can say biggest borrower of money through IBRD from the World Bank. The World Bank has a lot of programs going on in Africa. Okay. Then there is International Development Association, IDA. What is International Development Association is? It was formed recently and basically in the 1960s actually, but after the Marshall Plan got over. What it does is it provides loans only for the poor economies. Okay. It provides loans for only poor economies, soft loans for only poor economies. So what is the difference between IDA and IBRD? Basically, IBRD raises its own funds through this thing, financial markets, lucrative financial market. As in, IDRB has its own funds which it will invest in some other economy, get the profit out of that, and then invest that money in poor countries. Okay. Whereas IDA, that is International Development Association, its funding basically comes from the rich economies. The rich economies give money to these, money to this organization as charity, and this money is further, given to the poor countries. Okay. So that is the basic difference between the two. Okay. So now coming to IFC, that is International Finance Corporation. Now what is International Finance Corporation? It promotes private sector investment in its member countries, particularly developing countries, and as a way to reduce poverty and improve people's lives. What IFC does is it will try to promote the private sector in a country. What will happen is, if there is a growth of industry through private sector, then it will lead to more jobs. That will lead to more wages. And that will in turn lead to reduction in poverty. So this is the basic aim of International Finance Corporation. Okay. Now coming to MIGA, that is Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. What does MIGA do? Is MIGA provides guarantees to private sector when they invest in these poor and developing economies. As in, if there is, imagine an African country, okay, X, let's take an example of X. If a private player wants to invest money in this country X, MIGA, this agency, will stand as a guarantor for X. MIGA will stand as a guarantor of X. If there is any kind of default on the from the side of X, as in if X suddenly decides to not let the private players do business in X, then MIGA will stand as a guarantor. MIGA will make sure that the private player is not at loss. What happens basically is, when we are talking about economies, poor economies, most of the African economies have change of regimes or military coups or dictatorships. So basically the policies or the investment atmosphere in these countries is not conducive. As in, today if a private player invests in country X, when there was some other government, suddenly there is a military coup, suddenly there is martial law, there is suddenly a military dictator in that country, so he will stop the private player from doing business in this country. But the private player has already invested his money in developing infrastructure or developing, training the people of this country X so that he can do business. So in such cases, the private player will be at loss. So most of the private players refrain from actually investing in such countries which are unstable, which have unstable governments. So such times, the MIGA will stand as a support for X. The MIGA will tell the private player to invest in X, and if anything happens in this country, MIGA is guaranteeing the private player that it will be compensated. Okay. So this is how it works. Okay. And now finally coming to International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. Now what does this organization do? Is basically, if there is, it facilitates the conciliation and arbitration of investment disputes between member countries and individual investors. Okay. So as I said before, like what happens in MIGA's case, so there is again a private player who is investing in an X country in Africa. Okay. So now suddenly the model that was, as in if when the private player was investing in X, X had told the private player that you will get maybe 100 rupees profit every year. But suddenly X tells him, after investing the money and after training and after infrastructural development, suddenly X will tell him, no, you will only get 50 rupees profit every year. So now the private player is at loss. So at such a time, he can approach ICSID. Okay. He can approach this organization which will act as an arbitrator between the dispute of these two parties. It can provide justice to the private player. Okay. So this is how it works. Now, World Bank sponsors a lot of projects in India as well. The Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan project of India was sponsored by World Bank. And in healthcare, it sponsors in agricultural development. Then there are a lot of other sectors as well. It also, participated in increasing the Millennium Development Goal. India wanted to achieve the Millennium Development Goal. At that time also the World Bank has sponsored many projects in India. It has sponsored the Ganga cleanup project in India, and n number of projects across the states as well as the center. The World Bank has sponsored in India. Okay. So now, coming on to the difference between the two organizations. Okay. Firstly, IMF provides only short-term loans. Okay. Whereas World Bank provides long-term loans. Long-term loans for 20-25 years, 25 years or 30 years. The interest rates on the loans of IMF is very high. The interest rates of the loans of World Bank is very low. IMF will provide loans only for balance of payment crisis or financial crisis, or you can say foreign exchange crisis. Okay. Whereas World Bank provides loans for development to poor countries, for development of education, for development of health, for development of infrastructure. Okay. So this is the basic difference between them. Okay. And IMF will provide loans on the basis of the quota, whereas World Bank does not provide on the basis of quota, it provides on the basis of the project that is there. Okay. So this is the main or the basic difference between the two organizations. So that's about it, and I hope you've understood whatever I've said. And if you haven't, then please, log on to my website, that is www.m2k-education.com, or you can call me on 922-184-9650. Okay. I hope you've enjoyed the lecture. Thanks a lot for listening to me, and all the best for your exam.